What up, everybody? This is Double G for PopBlurred.com, the 10-Yard Fight NFL Preview Podcast. Yesterday, you may have heard part one of our NFL Preview Podcast. We discussed the AFC in full detail. On with me were Jason, a.k.a. the Dirty White Boy, Mike C., and KJ. For today's part two, we're going to go over the NFC in full detail. We're going to go over every team in every division. And we're also going to give our Super Bowl picks, and we'll end with a little bit of fun fantasy stuff. So listen in, and you'll hear KJ, Mike Cunningham, and myself as we talk about the NFC. Let's move on, and I want to get the NFC West out of just get it over with, and then we can move on, because this division is brutal. I know that a lot of people think that the 49ers are the team to beat in the NFC. I'm happy that people think that, but I am deathly afraid of the Seattle Seahawks, and to a lesser extent, I'm afraid of the Rams, because the Rams play the Niners just about better than anybody else consistently. So the Niners, obviously, Michael Crabtree, he ruptured his Achilles. He's going to be out for at least most of the first 3 quarters of the season is what I'm guessing, unless he's able to do whatever Kobe Bryant is doing with his Achilles, running on gravity-free treadmills or whatever they're doing. He may not come back. I think he'll come back near the end, and maybe he can be a little bit of a help for them in the playoffs if they get there. They also are without Mario Manningham, who's seemingly always injured. So they go into the season with a bunch of younger guys that you've probably never heard of, lining up at wideout for them. They just made a trade for another guy from the Seahawks, who the Seahawks were trying to put on their practice squad, and they kind of snaked him for their regular season roster. So they're doing a lot to try to figure out what they're going to do wide receiver wise. They did pick up Anquan Boldin for basically nothing from the Ravens, who were going to cut Boldin. So there are questions there. Now, where there aren't questions is on their defensive line, their linebackers, their front set, their front three plus the linebackers are one of the best in the NFL. Their secondary is going to be tested for sure, and they're going to have to grow up quickly. They grabbed Nnamdi Asomugha, but he's going to be more of their nickel guy. At times, they drafted Eric Reed to replace Deshaun Goldson. So there's going to be some learnings there. And I very much think that the second week where we play Seattle, where the 49ers play Seattle on NBC, is going to be a very telling game, because I think when you have that litmus test so early, you can then figure out what you really have. The Packers and the Seahawks back-to-back is brutal to start the season. We had the Packers number last year, both in the regular season and in the playoffs, but they're always going to be, at least offensively, they're always going to be ready to play. So I think the Niners go 11-5. I think the Seahawks go 11-5. Now, how that shakes out, I'm not sure. I would not be surprised if the Niners play as the wild card and Seattle wins the division. I think Seattle is one of the strongest teams in the NFL. And if I wasn't a 49er fan and I was on the outside looking in, I think that the makeup of the Seahawks is just about as good as you want for a team. They have the talent, they have the swagger, they have the confidence, they have the coach that irritates everybody just as much as Jim Harbaugh irritates everybody. So I think they have all of the special stew on that football team, and they're gonna be really good. So I also threw out some questions to a friend who's a big Rams fan, and he thinks that the Rams are going to be improved this year. I don't see it necessarily, because I still think they're going to be inconsistent, but I do think that they will be able to, be in that 8-8 range, 7-9 range. They were 7-8 last year, so I think they'll be very similar. But like I said, they play the Niners well. They're going to play the Seahawks well. but the fact that they got to play both of those teams twice is gonna be hard for them. Arizona is gonna bring up the rear. Carson Palmer is gonna help, but who's blocking for the guy? He's gonna be one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the league. He'll probably also throw for like 4,500 yards because they're gonna be behind so much. So I think from a franchise standpoint, Carson Palmer may not be half bad, but I think Arizona is going to be the bottom dwellers of that division. All right, so I said a whole lot. KJ, your thoughts on the NFC West?
Best division in football. The Rams and the Cardinals. I think the Rams actually had a better record than the Seahawks and the Niners last year in the division. I think they went like 3-1 and whatever it was. Anyway. They only lost one game, I think. But they're just too tough. The Niners and the Seahawks are just too tough. I think the Cardinals will be okay, but again, the division's just too tough. I think I have the Niners winning the division, but I think, like you said, I think they'll be either one game difference or they'll be tied. Everybody here in Seattle's just loving the Seahawks, and I'm trying not to jump on the bandwagon here, but it's kind of hard because they're fun to watch. They've got that swagger, like you said. They're cocky. The secondary is just big, and they're really good. And they picked up a couple guys from the defensive line, which was like their weakness last year. And like the Niners, they're kind of dealing with some wide receiver injury issues with Percy Harvin and Sidney Rice. But I think they'll be okay there. I like Russell Wilson. It's going to be fun to watch, and there's going to be a lot of talk around here. There already is just through the preseason. Everyone's just excited. They went undefeated in the preseason. It should be a good season to watch.
Mike.
Not a lot of disagreement from me with this division. I actually think it's a really intriguing division. I do think that the San Francisco 49ers are going to win the division again, if only by virtue of the fact that I think that they are a slightly better team, and the Seahawks are actually having similar wide receiver injury issues to the 49ers. Garrett, if I was you, I'd be pretty excited because I think this team's built for like the next 5 or 6 years to be pretty good. I really like the Marcus Lattimore draft pick as a potential huge value pick. And I don't know what their plans are. Maybe you can expand on this a little bit. I know they picked up Jonathan Baldwin recently in a trade, and he did make the team. I know a little bit about him because he went to my alma mater. I saw him play at Pitt. He definitely came out of school too early, and he's a head case. But physically and in terms of the athletic ability and skills, he's got all of the ability to be a big play guy. So I don't know how I think he's pretty low on the depth chart. I don't know how they're looking to incorporate him into the offensive at all. But I think he could be somebody who could sort of stem the tide with Crabtree out for a while. St. Louis, I think it's safe to say this is a make or break year for Sam Bradford. Franchise quarterbacks don't get 4 or 5 years like they used to, 3 years to sit and 2 years to get to being good. With the exception of your rare Alex Smith, that just doesn't happen anymore. So, if I remember correctly, I don't remember who it was they had a chance to get, maybe Cam Newton or something like that. One of those drafts within the last 3 years, they had the chance to have the number 1 pick, and they traded down, actually. And again, my memory is not serving me. Oh, no, it was RG3. They traded the pick to Washington.
Oh, yeah, that's
right.
To get RG3. And when they did that, they basically made a big statement that, look, we need help in a lot of areas, and Sam Bradford is our quarterback. And that just hasn't worked out to this point. So I think he is very intriguing because I think he could have a breakout season. But I think if he doesn't, he might be, in Matt Leinart territory in a couple of years. And Arizona, again, so many problems there, but a lot of intriguing storylines. They have Carson Palmer, who I frankly think is over the hill, but, is a competent NFL quarterback. Will he be able to get Larry Fitzgerald the ball? Will anybody be able to protect him? Who's their running back going to be? They brought in Rashard Mendenhall, but he got hurt almost immediately. They lost LaRod Stevens-Howling. I believe they lost Beanie Wells. I think they're going to bring up the rear, but with a new coach who did very well in a relief role last year, they're going to be a pretty interesting team to watch. So I think that division's really intriguing, but as far as the outcome, it's not going to be any different at the top or with a wild card this year.
You know,
Yeah.
I mentioned I didn't want to get too like football nerdy as we discuss this stuff, but I read something that it may have been Barnwell's piece that he put up today, but he ranked his worst 8 teams in the league, and he actually put the Rams and the Cardinals on that list. And I was surprised at the Rams just because they went 7-8-1 last year, and they played the Niners and the Seahawks so tough. He said that Sam Bradford is the check down artist in the league right now, but he also said that when you compared the percentage of his completion percentage to Amendola, he was above 65. It was like 66%. But to the rest of the receivers, it was below 60 or something like that. So he loses his best guy. But my buddy, who's the big Rams fan, he said that they have other guys who are up and coming. I think I forget the guy's name.
Tavon Austin.
Yeah, Tavon Austin, who they drafted, and then there's another guy,
Chris Givens.
Givens, and then is there who's the guy that was there last year? I forget, but he expects those guys to actually blossom, and he thinks that they're not going to really miss Amendola at all. Now he very well admitted that it's definitely like a very Homer way of thinking, but that they do, and they lost Steven Jackson, so Darrell Richardson I think starts as the starting running back, but he doesn't believe that he will even be the guy at the end of the season. Brandon Gibson is the other person I was thinking of. So I like you said, Sam Bradford, it's really a make or break season for him because they invested so heavily, and he was one of the last first round picks to really make all that money when they changed it soon thereafter. So there's a lot riding on him, and the Rams are I like it when the Rams don't do well because they are really the true rivals for the Niners, but having a really good friend who's a Rams fan, I do get to hear a little bit of insight from him. So let's take a look at Tristan. I actually didn't even read off their AFC West picks, but Tristan for AFC West has Denver. He also has Kansas City winning the wild card. So much like Mike, he does believe in Alex Smith. So and as far as his NFC West, he has the Niners. And then he actually doesn't have Seattle making the playoffs. He has the Arizona Cardinals making the wild card out of the NFC West, which is really surprising to me.
Yeah.
And Jeff chose the Broncos, and then he chose the Niners and Seattle to win the wild card. So let's move on to the NFC South. And this is a division that has been really carried by the Atlanta Falcons of late. The Atlanta Falcons were very close to going to the Super Bowl last year. The 49ers pulled that game out, but Matt Ryan was very close to bringing that team back and winning the game. Carolina with Cam Newton, and they've really they've just made so many moves on their roster with the new folks in charge. New Orleans needs to bounce back, after losing your coach, and Drew Brees didn't have the Drew Brees kind of season that we've seen in the past. And then Tampa Bay, also another team that has kind of, been up and down of late, and I think a lot of people think that they're going to be a lot better this year. So this team outside of the Falcons is kind of interesting. And last year, the Falcons were 13-3, and all 3 teams were 7-9. So what do you guys feel about this? And actually, let's ask Mike first.
Sure. I think that the Falcons are the team to beat in this division again. I think getting that playoff win last year was a huge weight off of the shoulders of that franchise. I mean, Matt Ryan had really already established himself as a very solid, franchise quarterback for that team who won a lot of games in the regular season, but they just couldn't get the job done in the playoffs. They took care of that last year in dramatic fashion, and like you said, they almost came back against the Niners to make the Super Bowl. So I like them to win the division again. I really like the Steven Jackson addition. I know he's got a lot of mileage on those tires, but he's still a young guy. It seems like he's been around forever and rushing for 1,300 plus yards, for 10 years. But I think, has he even hit 30 yet? I'm not sure about that. But, he's just been buried in St. Louis on so many bad teams. He's been kind of underappreciated. I actually like the Saints to have a big bounce back year this year. I think obviously the whole Bounty Gate thing really kind of undermined their season last year. I still don't know quite how I felt about all of those punishments. I thought it was a little bit harsh, some scapegoating going on. But, I mean, they got their coach back this year. I think this is kind of like a last hurrah for them. I mean, I think their window to win a title, another title, is about to close. And I think this could be that last year where they make that last push to be a legit contender in the NFC. So I like them to get a wild card. I actually don't think the Buccaneers are going to improve this year. I think their secondary is a little bit better. They're a little bit better on the defensive end. I don't like Greg Schiano as a pro coach. I mean, I think he's a college coach. I think that showed at times last year. I think that's going to continue to show. I think they got a big question mark at the quarterback position. I just don't think they've got the skill players on offense. Obviously, the muscle hamster, showed some flashes of big playability last year, had a couple huge games, Doug Martin. But I just don't like them. I hate to be so conservative. I'm just seeing a lot of the same from last season. And then the Panthers, I do think they will improve. I think they'll be the team that makes that next step forward. I could see them finishing around 8-8. I mean, Cam Newton has to continue to go. Steve Smith is kind of on the downward trajectory of his career, but I think their defense has improved a little bit with experience and with some of their draft picks they've had. Their running back situation's a mess. I mean, they have two guys who've been a part of their system for many years, and neither one of them seems to be able to stay healthy. So, but I do think they might make a difference, win a couple more games this year, and finish around 8-8. Really, I like the Falcons, though, and I like the Saints to get the other wild card in the NFC along with the Seahawks and make a little bit of a run this year.
Cam Newton led the team in rushing last year, by the way.
Yeah. That's the running back.
Yeah, D'Angelo Williams, and he's often hurt, and he's so frustrating to own in fantasy football.
Yeah.
All right, KJ, what do you think?
I like the Falcons. I picked them as my Super Bowl champs last year, and I came really close to getting that right. Well, getting my Super Bowl picks right. So I'm going to stick with the Falcons. The Bucks, I think they'll be okay. I kind of wanted them to sneak into the 6th spot, but I don't know if they're. Again, like Mike said, I'm not really into Josh Freeman, and he's kind of in that make or break year too. The Saints, they are the Bucks could finish with that 6th seed or flip flop there. Offensively, they're awesome. On defense, I'm just not so sure. And then, like you guys said, the Panthers, they don't have a running game, and Steve Smith is getting up there. I mean, it's just Cam Newton. That's it. So I think it's the Falcons. I like Steven Jackson. I didn't realize they picked up OC Umenara. Yeah, the guy from the Giants. Umenara, whatever. They picked him up, so that should help because I think they lost one of their guys from last year. What was it? John Abrams, I think. So I like the Falcons there.
Yeah,
and I like that they convinced Tony Gonzalez convinced himself to stick around for another year.
I think they just needed to show him some love, and he was like, all right, I'm back.
Yeah.
I was looking at the Saints, and Mike has them as his wild card and as a bounce back. The problem is not offensively, and I even said, Drew Brees wasn't the Drew Brees that we've seen. I mean, the guy still threw for over 5,000 yards and 43 touchdowns. I think he threw for more picks than we're used to him seeing, or we used to seeing from him. But they have an interesting running game. Mark Ingram hasn't really taken over. He's still kind of like the short yardage guy. Pierre Thomas is a very valuable utility kind of running back, but he's probably not your every down guy. But Colston and Jimmy Graham are legit. The defense, though, like, they were the single worst defense in the NFL last year. I think they're going to have to drastically improve, to maybe the middle of the pack. And, they can maybe win 9 or 10 games, but still, to make that kind of improvement. And we'll also sort of see what does coaching mean? What does it mean in the NFL these days when your head coach who you love and who's, probably one of the top 5 head coaches in the league, he comes back to the team. Like, we'll see what that means to them. So I don't have the second wild card coming out of the division. I do think Atlanta has what it takes to hang with San Francisco and Seattle, though.
Yeah, agree.
All right, so let's move on. Actually, let's get to Jeff and Tristan's picks. Jeff has the Falcons, of course. He also has the Saints, like Mike, so he has them in the wild card. Tristan has the Saints actually winning the South and Atlanta being the wild card. So lots of faith in New Orleans on the Pop Blurred staff there. Let's move on to the NFC North. You have the Packers, who are generally head and shoulders above, for the most part. The Bears, who they seem to always be right in the thick of things, and at times they will fall off at the end. The Lions are kind of the team who everybody thinks is going to be good, and then they disappoint outside of the 1 year a couple years ago. And then Minnesota, who probably is going to be one of the worst teams in football this year, even though they made the playoffs. So I think a lot of people expect them to regress a little bit. So I'll go first, actually, and I'll sort of give you guys my thoughts. I definitely think the Packers are gonna be the dandy of the division. In comparison, we talked about the Saints. The Packers 2 years ago were the single worst defense in the NFL, and they did. They brought their defensive analytics back to the middle. So I guess it can be done. In a year. They were able to bring a lot of the yardage stuff. They were giving up so many yards 2 years ago when the Giants upset them in the playoffs, and a lot of people thought the Packers were going to win the Super Bowl. But they are a lot better from that standpoint. But still, you have the best quarterback in the NFL. Your running game is hopes to get a little bit of a shot of inspiration there with the running back. Is Lacy their starting guy?
Yeah, I think so.
So yeah, I think offensively they're going to be just fine. Randall Cobb turned into their sort of their Wes Welker-ish kind of guy. So they're going to be able to throw the ball with anybody, and the way that they're coached and stuff, I think they're going to be right there again. I don't think they're as good as San Francisco, Seattle, and Atlanta, but I don't think they're that far away either, just because they're so good offensively. Now, Chicago is very interesting because you're basically putting faith in Jay Cutler if you think that they're going to have a good season. Cutler was okay last year, but in the age of the NFL where your starting quarterback generally has some pretty gaudy statistics. His statistics were a little average. But you still have Forte, who's a great, he can run, he can catch. And, you have one of the best receivers in the NFL in Brandon Marshall, who caught, 118 balls last year. I think they're going to be right in the mix. Detroit, unfortunately, and actually not unfortunately, because I hate their head coach just as much as I hate Pete Carroll. Did you guys know that Matt Stafford threw the ball 727 times last year?
Yeah,
that's ridiculous.
But you did mention the Reggie Bush thing, which I think is going to be pretty big because Bush doesn't only help. He'll help a little bit in the running game. Like, I think they have guys there who could give them sort of what Bush can give them, but it's in the passing game where he really is going to help them out. Calvin Johnson was 40-something yards away from 2,000-yard season for a receiver. He's ridiculous. So they have all the offensive firepower as well, but just defensively, they were not what people expected them to be. They drafted all those guys on the defensive line and still, gave up 437 some odd points last year. So I think Minnesota, like I said, is going to be the worst team. Detroit, Chicago, and Green Bay is at the top. So I'm hedging on Chicago whether or not I think they're going to be a wild card. But what do you guys think? Let's go with Mike.
Right. So it's interesting. I feel like the NFC North to me is the best division in football, and it's one of these situations where I've already picked my 2 wild card teams. I don't think that two teams are going to get out of this division to the playoffs, but on some level, theoretically, I could see any of the 4 teams actually winning the division if things go a certain way, injuries fall a certain way. I do think it's a quarterback-driven league. I think that the Packers will win the division because they do, as you mentioned, Garrett, have the best quarterback in the NFL, and Aaron Rodgers. I do see them starting to go downhill within the next couple of years. So they have lost some of those skill players that got them to that Super Bowl victory 3 years ago. Greg Jennings is gone. Obviously, Woodson, who was a big cog in their defense, is gone. But I think they have enough firepower to win this division. You look at the Vikings. I guess I don't see them being as bad as maybe you do, Garrett. I don't know. And again, I'm not an NFC expert. I kind of view this division from afar as a whole. I certainly don't think Christian Ponder is Tom Brady, and I know I accidentally put him on the Jaguars earlier on in the broadcast. I was talking about
You're talking about Gabbert.
Talking about Blaine Gabbert, of course, but to some degree, those guys have been interchangeable to me the last couple of years. Although I do know Ponder did, at least manage the game well last year. I mean, Adrian Peterson is such a weapon for them. If they can, muck it up in that division and run the ball 30 times a game, play 90s NFL football. They could mess around and win 8 games. The Lions, I mean, again, which Lions are you going to get? Are you going to get the Lions of 2 years ago that, put up Arena League points and played good enough defense to make the playoffs? Or are you going to get the team last year that, just constantly turned the ball over, was completely predictable on offense, and got most of their yardage and points in garbage time when it didn't really matter? I can't think of a sneakier record breaker last year than Calvin Johnson breaking the all-time receiving record. I remember thinking when it was within reach, like, really? Like, because again, to get into fantasy mode, like, looking at him and playing against him, it seemed like he would go the whole half with like 2 fantasy points for half the season.
Yeah,
by the end of the game, he'd have 20.
Well, he only put the ball in the end zone 5 times. I think I read a stat where he had got stopped within the 5-yard line like more times than anybody else in the league, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable.
The Lions were like tackled 23 times inside the 5-yard line. Is that a stat that I wrote down that I saw through fantasy?
That's hilarious.
That's crazy.
Hilarious. That's going to be a nightmare for anybody who owns him. But he was like Dwayne Bowe on steroids in terms of garbage time, receptions last year. So, but again, they could mess around and, score 35 points a game. They're so unpredictable. And, Reggie Bush does give them a little balance. I liked Mikel or Michael LaSure, I don't know how to say his first name, last year, as a power back, as a goal line back. And then, you got the Bears. To me, the only thing holding the Bears, well, there's 2 things holding the Bears back. One is that they've never had an offensive line to protect Cutler. And I mean, as much as he's kind of a, unlikable guy, I actually feel kind of sorry for Cutler because, I feel like he could be an elite quarterback in the league. He just hasn't had enough time to throw the ball. And, they got Brandon Marshall. They've got Alshon Jeffrey, the second-year receiver out of South Carolina. They got some weapons there. The question for them is they've got a CFL guy coaching them. I mean, they got a first-year head coach that we don't know anything about. We don't know what his philosophy is going to be. So,
I forgot about that. No Lovey.
Yeah, no, Lovey's gone. Urlacher, who has been, more of a figurehead leader the last couple of years, but the kind of the anchor of their defense and their leader on defense is gone. So, I mean, but again, I look at all these teams. I on paper, I like them in some kind of weird way, as strange as it is. I think the Packers are going to win. I don't think there's going to be a wild card out of this division, but I think it's going to make for some really entertaining football this year.
Yeah, my thing with the Vikings is as I look at them offensively, and basically Peterson is going to have to duplicate the season that he had or even do better because, you have Christian Ponder throwing to, they did pick up Greg Jennings, but they have Joe Webb as their fifth receiver, who was the quarterback who played in the playoff game last year. So I just think, for Ponder, like, the idea should have been, okay, let's get this guy, some guys who can catch the ball. And, they lost Percy Harvin. Percy Harvin goes to Seattle. Greg Jennings is his main guy, and, Rudolph is okay as a tight end. But, outside of that, it's Peterson and a lot more Peterson. So that was just more my thought. But, KJ, wanted to give you your quick thoughts on who you think comes out of this one.
Yeah, like you guys said, I think the Packers, and kind of like what Mike said, it's like I want to pick either the Lions or the Bears, but I just don't know. I think the Lions are going to be kind of interesting with Reggie Bush, catching passes out of the backfield. That should be interesting, and I think Stafford's going to have a huge year that way. I'm interested to see this new coach from the CFL. He's supposed to be a good, big offense guy, so I think Matt Forte is going to have an awesome year. And then, like you said, the Vikings, I see Adrian Peterson, and that's all. I mean, I don't know who else is going to step up there. But I totally forgot that they made the playoffs last year because I was like, well, they're not any good. But, oh, wait, they made the playoffs. That's right. So, yeah, I see the Packers. And then, I don't know, I'm wavering on my 6th seed. I have Detroit there as the 6th seed, but I picked them last year, and it seems like I picked them the year before, and they did crap. So I guess one more year I'll go with them and then go from there.
So, Tristan has the Packers winning the division. He also has the Packers going to conference finals, so he thinks that they're going to do well. Jeff, same thing. Packers winning the North. He also has the Packers going to conference finals. So lots of Packers love from both of those guys. All right, the NFC East, which is kind of like the one that gets the most hype every year because the Dallas Cowboys are in the division and the Washington Redskins. Michael Vick also is in the division, and the New York Giants, who have and Eli Manning with his Super Bowl victories. So I think from a perspective of beginning every year, it's just like, oh wow, this division should be pretty good. But last year, Washington won with a 10-6 record, and we saw how Seattle kind of took them apart a little bit. The Giants were, I guess you could say they were a little bit underachievers, even though they won 9 games. And Dallas is the ultimate underachiever. And Philly had a really terrible year. So does this change at all? Do you think that Washington is going to be the team to beat again with RG3 in his second year? I kind of feel like the Giants are going to bounce back, and I don't know if it's just because it seems like every other year they do, but I feel like the Giants are going to win this division. I don't know if anybody else comes out of this division as a wild card, but let's go, Mike, again. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't want to steal your thoughts, but I couldn't agree with you more. I think this division is terrible. I don't think it lives up to the hype. I don't think it has really for the last 3 or 4 years. They'll occasionally, I mean, with the Giants making deep runs on odd number years, as you said, and winning Super Bowls, that kind of brings a little bit of extra luster to the division every year. But beyond that, I mean, they've done that out of the 6th spot both times, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So the 6th spot in the NFC. So I don't like the Cowboys. I mean, I think the Romo experiment did not work. I certainly think it's not his fault there. I just don't think they have enough weapons around him, and their defense has never really been good enough for them to win more than 8 or 9 games. The Eagles, pretty intriguing, with Chip Kelly coming over from Oregon. It's going to be really interesting to see what it's like with them running an up-tempo offense in the NFL, especially with Michael Vick at the helm of it.
To me, it means that the defense is going to be on the field a lot.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, yeah, you're going to have a worn-out defense that, frankly, wasn't very good the last couple of years to begin with. I mean, that was their Achilles heel. They've got Mike Vick. They've got LaShawn McCoy. They've got Deshaun Jackson. So they've got skilled players on the offensive end.
Macklin's also out for the season, I believe, right?
Oh, yeah. He is gone for the year. So, I mean, I can't remember what injury. Did he tear his ACL, or was it another Achilles? I'm not sure, but he
might have been a knee, I think.
Yeah, I just don't, especially with a first-year coach, similar to the Bears situation. I don't see them taking over the division that way. The Redskins are intriguing. I mean, can Alfred Morris do what he did last year when people know that he's coming off of a 1,400-yard season? Are they going to maybe key on him a little bit more? Is RG3 going to be as effective as he was last year? And even if he is he going to be subject to as many hits as he was last year? Is his knee going to hold up? We haven't seen him play at all since that playoff game last year. So we don't really know where he's at physically or in terms of his rhythm. I think it's a bounce back year for the Giants. If for no other reason, then I don't think any of the teams in this division are very good. And I think, that they have the most good experience and playoff experience at quarterback. And I think Eli, gets them over the hump again this year. And who knows? Anytime he's in the playoffs lately, it seems like they make a run. So,
well, I think KJ has to be an Eli Manning fan just because he's the baby brother of his favorite player of all time. Do you agree with us that the Giants are the team to beat in this division, or are you a believer in RG3?
Actually, none of the above. Well, with any of these guys, you just throw them in the hat and pick out who you think is going to win, I think. Very true. Because it's like I could go with any one of them. I went with the Cowboys, and that was just because. I like Dez Bryant. I think he did awesome last year. I think he's going to have a better year this year. So that's really the only reason I didn't have any, football sense in why I would pick the Cowboys. I kind of wanted to pick the Eagles just because they might be interesting to watch. But like you guys said, the defense is going to be on there a lot. The Giants, any one of these teams. And I didn't pick the Redskins because, I think Alfred Morris, people are going to be used to him. And then I want to see RG3 play before I, say that he's going to lead them to another 10 wins or whatever.
Part of the reason why the Redskins were so good is because they were the number one running team in football. They had Morris, who ran for 1,600 yards, and RG3 ran for 815 yards. So they were constantly moving the football, doing a little bit of the read option stuff and just pounding it with Alfred Morris, who, he ran 335 times. So yeah. They were constantly running the football. And will they have that with RG3 coming off the knee injury? They may not have that same, sort of thunder and lightning approach to the running game. And if they don't, you turn RG3 into a little bit more of a pocket passer, and then, what do you have there? You have Garcon, and I guess Santana Moss is still there. I think that's what teams are gonna look to stop that specifically, and can they adjust? Actually, they have ESPN has Santana Moss as their third string wide receiver, and has Josh Morgan and Pierre Garcon starting. So Santana has definitely gone down the depth chart. Go ahead and finish your thoughts. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh no, I'm pretty much done there.
Tony Romo may have thrown for the most underwhelming 4,900 yards ever in the history of the NFL.
Yeah, I was just looking at it going, wow. Yeah.
All right, so let's check out Jeff. Jeff has the Redskins winning the division, and Tristan has the Giants winning the division. So now we broke down sort of who we think is going to be good. Super Bowl picks. What do you guys think? I wrote down 7 teams that I thought could win the Super Bowl. 49ers, Seahawks, Denver, New England, Green Bay, Houston, Atlanta. But I kind of feel like those are the 7 teams that everybody is going to have on their list. The Giants, like Mike said, sneaking in sort of from the 6th seed to winning. I know the Steelers have actually done that as well. But it does seem like those are kind of the teams. Are there any other teams that you have on your list as possible Super Bowl contenders?
I actually have the Texans going to the Super Bowl.
So they're one of the 7 that I wrote down.
I don't know why. I watched one of their preseason games, and I know that doesn't really matter, but I just think they're going to have they're getting Brian Cushing's back. Brooks Reed should bounce back. J.J. Watt is just a beast, and they added Ed Reed. So on defense, they're pretty good. Ben Tate is an awesome backup to Arian Foster. So they don't really lose anything there if they lose Arian Foster. And DeAndre Hopkins, the rookie they got, I think he's a good complement to Andre Johnson. So I don't know. I like to pick something different, and I think that's why I took the Texans. I wanted to pick the Broncos, but I guess maybe if they do go to the Super Bowl, then I'm happy, and if they don't, and someone else goes, then I'll be, like, oh, hey, I made my pick, and that's cool. I don't know. So that's kind of why I went with them. I wanted something different, and I don't see the Patriots. I don't know. I mean, they got all those the rookie undrafted free agents that are catching the ball, and I'm not ready to pick them as the Super Bowl champs or anything, but. And I have the Texans losing to the Seahawks, which was tough for me to pick because, that's all I got to hear about is go Hawks. I had to remove, I went through my news feed after the first preseason game and just removed everyone on my Facebook that writes go Hawks because half those people probably couldn't even name the other three teams in the division. So it's kind of annoying there. But they did improve, like I said, on their defensive line, and they got the best secondary in the game. So I have them going to the Super Bowl. I guess that's.
Sweet. So who do you have winning?
I got Seahawks over the Texans.
Okay, Mike.
My list. I wrote down 5 teams. The teams I came up with kind of on a whim were the 49ers, Falcons, Patriots, Saints, and Broncos. One thing that's interesting about my list is I think the AFC is definitely a lot weaker in terms of legitimate contenders than the NFC this year. If I was to add 2 or 3 more teams to that list, they would probably all be out of the NFC. I'd put Green Bay on there, possibly Seattle. I really think that the AFC is down to the Patriots and the Broncos this year. Maybe I've just got a bias toward the old head quarterbacks. I don't know. But I feel like maybe both of those guys have one last run in them. I think they're definitely still the class of the AFC. I think that the Broncos are going to come out of the AFC to play in the Super Bowl. And I like the 49ers. Again, you're going to maybe want to kill me, Garrett, but I like the 49ers. They've made that natural progression each of the last couple of years. They made the championship game 2 years ago, lost a tough one. Last year, lost a close Super Bowl with a lot of freak things with, the lights going out at the Superdome and all of those types of things. They just seem to be that team that's been learning how to win. They've stockpiled a lot of talent. I know they've already had some big injuries with Crabtree. I wasn't even aware that he was even going to be potentially available for this year. For me, an Achilles, especially for a speed player, is, a season-ending injury. But if if he could even provide a presence or a decoy, that would be huge for them. And so I'm just going to pick the 49ers to beat the Broncos in the Super Bowl. That's my pick.
All right. Well, I kind of have to pick the 49ers because I cannot show my face around if I do not pick the 49ers. I do think they have a great chance. Like I said, I think it's either San Francisco, Seattle, or Atlanta. And if it's Seattle, it's going to just bother me so much. I can just see Richard Sherman's face, screaming at somebody saying, you mad, bro? You mad, bro?
Yeah.
The Falcons, I like them too. I think the Jackson thing is going to be a really big deal. Like, I could see the Falcons having the best record in all of football, but then but then winning in the playoffs is a little bit different. So I'm going to go Niners. I'm going to say that Denver and New England, I think, are the 2 best teams. I felt like New England was going to be the team that the Niners were going to face last year, and they lost and they got their butts kicked by the Ravens. Now, without the Ravens there, who seem to be the one team that they have troubles with getting over that hump, can it be Denver? Can Denver push them around a little bit? Can they be physical with New England, which seems to be the way to beat them? And then we know that they can score over the top for sure. So to me, that's going to be the big game, and I'm going to say New England. This is kind of like, Tom Brady plays against the team that he rooted for growing up. That whole thing. I thought it was going to happen last year, so that'll be my pick. I think the Niners are going to win. I think they are kind of the team that is just really bad for New England. Seattle would be very similar to me. Like, I think both of those teams will just beat up, Seattle and possibly Denver, or New England and possibly Denver too. So I definitely think either of the three teams in the NFC, if they make the Super Bowl, I think they will win. And this is, we're predicting this several months in advance, and tons of things can change. But right now, that's my pick. So let me give you, we'll give Jeff and Tristan's pick. So Tristan has the Denver Broncos as the Super Bowl champions, beating the 49ers. And Jeff has the Patriots beating the 49ers. So both of them take the AFC teams to win it all. So we're done with that. But before we got off, I know you guys are big fantasy football players. In your main leagues, how happy are you with your teams? And also, who were the sleepers of your draft? Like, who did you think? Because it seems like the teams that do very well will hit on one guy. Like, I hit on Doug Martin last year in, I don't remember, the 5th round or something, and he really carried me at points. So first, I want to go to KJ. Are you happy with your main team, and who were kind of the guys that you were looking at that you maybe found doing a lot of research that other people weren't aware of?
I'm not that happy with my team. Driving to the draft, I told my 8-year-old, I said, whatever I do not want the number 2 pick in the draft. I didn't want to make that decision, and I let him choose the cards, and I ended up number 2. And so this was a couple weeks ago. I took Arian Foster the next day. I'm dealing with injury issues, and I really wanted Trent Richardson. I tried to trade the guy that had number 7, and he thought I was weird. Why would I want to trade number 2 for number 7? And I was like, I just want to. I don't want to be number 2. And so he kind of thought something was suspicious, so didn't want to trade me, which didn't make sense. But, I really, going back now, I wish I would have just drafted Trent Richardson. I think he's going to be awesome. I think he's going to be the number 2 player overall. Again, I don't know why. I just think he's going to get a lot of touches, and he's just a big back, and, you don't get that often anymore. And I probably made one of the dumbest trades ever. I traded – one guy had Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. I traded Foster for Rodgers, thinking that I could flip, because I had Kaepernick and Rodgers, thinking I could flip one of those guys. Well, like I said, nobody in this, up here, they want Kaepernick. I tried to trade a guy, his team name's Screw Harbaugh. He's not going to want Kaepernick. I mean, that was one of the stupidest things. Like, hey, you want him? He's like, no. Oh, your name's Screw Harbaugh. Okay. I got a couple, F-offs from when I asked them if they wanted Kaepernick, and so then I had to trade Rodgers, and I didn't get any bites, so I ended up getting you guys will probably want me to hang up after this, but I got Darren McFadden in a trade. So I went from a guy that Arian Foster that's often injured to a guy that's always injured. So yeah, no, my team's not good. Now sleeper guys, I like Giovanni Bernard from the Bengals. I don't know how often he'll play. And then as a deep sleeper, I like Niall Davis, the backup for Jamal Charles. But that's running back wise, I guess. Did you want me to go more with other positions, or?
No, just throw us one more guy who you think may help you that other people probably he wasn't on their board.
I took Jared Cook, the St. Louis Rams tight end. Just because Peter King was talking him up all summer, and Peter King seems to know a lot about football. So I like Jared Cook, and then the other guy that I liked was T.Y. Hilton from the Colts.
Yep.
I think he's going to have an awesome year, even though he's he's number 3 on the chart, but I think he's actually the number 2 guy, and probably will be the number 1 guy at the end of the year. But those are the kind of guys that I went after.
Yeah, I agree with you. I have him on. I don't have him on my main team, but on some of the other leagues that I play with, I did grab him specifically. All right, so Before I get to Mike, I just kind of want to shout out something that KJ wrote for the website, which is the and fantasy football leagues hopefully are all done and drafted, but a couple things made me crack up. He wrote the do's and don'ts of the draft season, and being someone who has run a league since I was 16 years old, and I'll let you do the math. So I've been running this league for like 21 years. He hit a couple things that really made me laugh because they were so right on. Don't be the person at the draft with the outdated magazine. Like that's right on the money. I have a cousin who's like, he doesn't really pay attention to football, but he likes doing the draft, and he does fairly well for someone who doesn't really follow football. But every year he'll come with the magazine, and everyone's got their ESPN or Yahoo rosters, which are up to date. And so he's asking guys like, who does this guy play for? Who does this guy play for? So that's on the money. Okay, another one of my pet peeves. Don't be the person that always answers with, I know, I have him in my other league. Like, there are many of us who play in multiple leagues. I know some people will only play in one, but I drafted him in my other league. Yeah, that's very often heard at a fantasy draft. The paying your fee and paying it on time, that never happens. So those of you who run your own leagues, you know that to be true. This might be my favorite one. Do remember where you pick. The guy who's always asking, wait, is it my turn? Like, when's my turn? How come it's not my turn? How come he picked 2 times and I haven't picked yet? Especially when you're doing snakes. And then the guy who goes, it's like the 4th round of the draft. No, you said 3rd round. Oh, is Adrian Peterson taken? Yes, he was the first guy picked in the whole draft. Pay attention. Those crack me up. So,
and I sent that to everyone in my league, and guess how many guys still showed up with a magazine? Like half of them. And one of the things also was don't draft for someone else. Well, like the commissioner's like, dude, so and so broke both rules. He's brought the magazine and he's drafting for someone else. Like, oh, great.
So read that. I think I'll try to remember to link it in our post for this podcast. But before we go, I want Mike, happy with your team, and who were the sleeper guys that you took?
Yeah, I've done one draft. I've still got one draft to go, believe it or not. I'm happy with my team in the sense that I had the number 1 overall pick, which was kind of a no-brainer. But then I also managed in a 12-team league to get Tom Brady in the 2nd round. Which I was kind of surprised he fell that far. But particularly since in this league we get 6 points for passing touchdowns, which really puts extra value on quarterbacks. But I was pretty happy. I took a pretty late round pick on LaDavian Bell. I actually took 2 rookie running backs who will presumably be starting for their teams by midseason. One being Monty Ball for the Denver Broncos, and LaDavian Bell for the Steelers. I like young running backs, especially ones who are drafted specifically to come in and fill starting roles, because that's the one position it seems like you can expect no drop off from college to the pro game if you're good at the position. So I'm going to be interested to see what both of those guys do. And I took I took a very late round flyer. I took Justin Blackmon from the Jacksonville Jaguars in the 15th round. Wow. He's suspended for the first 4 games of the season, but he had a couple big games last year, and I know he's got some character issues, but he's got all the physical ability, and with Blaine Gabbert and the Jaguars presumably not being very good this year, I'm kind of looking for him to be that kind of garbage time guy like Dwayne Bowe was for me last year, who doesn't make much of an impact on the team, but maybe puts up some garbage numbers late in games. So in the 15th round, it's kind of like, not much risk. I can cut him loose if I need to, but I'm hoping he might produce for me by the middle of the season.
Yeah, that's a good pick.
In my main league that I've done forever, I'm coming off of an 11-2 regular season, and of course losing in the playoffs like always. Yeah. And so, we have a keeper league, which we only keep one guy, and it really doesn't matter who you keep, and there's no real, you don't have to draft at a specific round or lose your pick at a specific round. Like, you just keep one guy, and then you draft from the beginning. So, I was, I almost did the homer thing, and I was like, well, I will never ever have a chance to keep Kaepernick, more than likely, if he has a good season. And I was like, I'm going to keep Kaepernick, just to kind of make it a little bit more challenging for myself. And then come draft time, I was like, nope, I'm keeping Doug Martin. So I kept Doug Martin, and then with, I think I had like the 9th pick or something like that. And so Breeze was sitting there, and I had Breeze was my starting quarterback last year, so I picked him up again. So I have the 2 best guys from my team last year, so I'm pretty happy. And I seemingly always have Pierre Garçon and Antonio Brown from your Steelers, Mike. Seemingly always have those guys. The league, this league, we do PPR, so I grabbed Reggie Bush. So I'm hoping that he gets a lot of a lot of touches, not necessarily carries as much. I drafted the same kicker on every team because I don't know if you guys read Matthew Berry on ESPN, but
yeah.
He's a big Redskins guy, so he's like their kicker Kai Forbath. He's like just get him, he no one knows who he is, and he's gonna have a good season. So I drafted my kicker last every time, and he's available every single time. Didn't have to waste a pick on a kicker, was one of KJ's rules. And I seem to end up with Cecil Shorts as well on most of my teams. So. There's definitely a theme to the teams that I drafted. Like I have probably Antonio Brown on 4 of my 5 teams, and Cecil Shorts on 4 of my 5 teams. So certain guys that I seem to always end up with. And I did pick DeAndre Hopkins as well on many teams, kind of as like my last skill player pick. So. Hoping that maybe he can do something later in the season. The thing that you brought up about Justin Blackmon, I mean, he's the only receiver that Gabbert has any sort of chemistry with. So even though he's out for the first 4 weeks, by week 5 he should be back, and as long as he's healthy and his head straight, I think he should slide right back in. So I think that was a pretty good pick on your end too.
Yeah,
and I would say on your end, I mean, Antonio Brown, it's all bears down to his health and Ben's health. I mean, if you look at last year, they both got hurt within 2 weeks of each other, I think, and neither one of them was the same whenever either respective guy came back. So prior to that, I mean, Antonio Brown was well on his way to a Pro Bowl season, as was Ben. So I think especially in a PPR league, I think he's good because he's a good possession guy. He can make big plays, but he can also move the chains, and that's kind of been the theme of his career since he's been in Pittsburgh.
All right, guys. So, again, appreciate you guys coming on. I think this went a little bit longer than I thought, but when you do preseason stuff, you end up going long sometimes. But I hope that we can do this at some point during the season, where whether it be a big game or whether it be just something happens, or just kind of like a quarterly look back even. Would love to do it again with the both of you, and think that it could be fun, a fun deal.
Yeah,
definitely. Let's do it.
We just got to make sure that KJ's not sick next time. Even though I couldn't even tell that you were not feeling well.
I did. I felt like that Michael Jordan flu game kind of thing. Like a half an hour, I was just dying. I'm like, okay, when's this going on? But no, it was good. I appreciate it. It was fun.
Is it the Michael Jordan flu game or the Michael Jordan hangover game? Because that has actually been an argument for the last couple of years.
Oh, I'll take the flu game just because that's the way I'm feeling right now. But
that's a $10 million question, yeah. Or the bad pizza, the Michael Jordan bad pizza game.
Yeah, the food poisoning.
So many conspiracy theories.
All right, so again, thank you all, and hopefully we'll get some of these predictions right, and we can look back and go, aha. I said that the that the Denver Broncos were going to do well. Yes, so did everybody else.
Yeah.
But, the Jaguars are going to win the Super Bowl just to make us all look stupid.
All right, so for KJ, for Mike Cunningham, for the Dirty White Boy who was on earlier, I am Double G for popblurred.com. The 10-Yard Fight is the column that we will participate in this season writing about football. We will see you when we see you. Peace out.